Japan's government is tightening restrictions around the Fukushima nuclear power plant. It will soon be illegal to enter the 25-kilometer exclusion zone around the facility. Officials say they want to limit exposure to radiation and prevent looting. The ongoing crisis in Japan is reminding people in Ukraine about their own nuclear disaster. Tuesday, in fact, marks the 25th anniversary since an explosion at the nuclear reactor in Chernobyl unleashed toxic amounts of radiation into the air. Its effects are still being felt today. Our correspondent Anya Ardayeva traveled to Chernobyl to look at the legacy of the disaster.
The drive to the Chernobyl nuclear plant feels like going into a war zone. Checkpoints are everywhere. Cars and documents are scanned by guards. The 30-kilometer exclusion zone around the plant is still contaminated with radiation. And this is reactor number 4, the site of the worst nuclear disaster in modern history. 25 years ago, in the early hours of April 26, 1986, a massive explosion and fire released radioactive particles in Ukraine, Belarus, Russia, and large parts of Europe. Alexei Moskalenko was a policeman in Chernobyl when the disaster occurred.
The explosion sounded muffled, not very loud. People who were sleeping in their homes nearby didn't wake up. And after it blew up, a white heavy cloud was released and started moving towards Belarus.
57 workers died fighting the fire and reactor meltdown. Radiation levels at the power plant reached 20,000 roentgens per hour, about 40 times the estimated lethal dosage. And according to the World Health Organization, 237 workers were diagnosed with acute radiation sickness.
It took 10 days to contain fire and radioactive release that followed the explosion at reactor number 4 at Chernobyl nuclear power plant. Today, 25 years on, the area around the plant is still deeply contaminated and can never really be cleaned up. Nuclear fallout and waste can be moved and stored, but not deactivated. The sarcophagus of steel and concrete built over the reactor leaks radiation, and environmentalists say that locally produced food is contaminated by radioactive fallout.
The town of Pripyat, 3 kilometers from the troubled reactor, was a dynamic and young settlement. More than 50,000 people lived here. Most of them worked at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant.
Oh, look, these are shoes of my little daughter.
Alexei also lived in Pripyat. He was married there and his daughter was almost 4 years old when the accident occurred. He says that day began just like any other. Children were in schools and kindergartens. But then, 36 hours after the accident, an immediate evacuation was announced.
We weren't allowed to take any appliances with us. Refrigerators, ovens, that was strictly banned. What was allowed was one small plastic bag with personal belongings, photographs, documents, everything that would fit in. I only took documents and photographs. Oh yeah, and stamps. I collected stamps. Everything else was left behind.
Within 2.5 hours, the town of Pripyat was completely abandoned. A total 335,000 people were moved from the area around Chernobyl in the following months. The exact human cost of the accident is still disputed, but even the most conservative figures suggest that at least 4,000 people died prematurely from radiation, and there were numerous cases of skin disease, birth defects, and thyroid cancer levels dramatically elevated among local children who drank milk contaminated with radioactive iodine. And while the area around the plant is still unsuitable for living, and will be for years to come, hundreds of people come to work here every day to manage the plant's security and safety. Among them is Lauren Dodd. He's an American engineer who is directing the new containment project for the troubled reactor to replace the hastily built 1986 concrete structure. He says accidents like the one in Chernobyl are not likely to ever happen again.
As a nuclear engineer, I would like to think that that's almost impossible today. And I'll just note that, what happened here at Chernobyl 25 years ago, has not been repeated, anywhere, and I think it's extremely unlikely that this could ever happen again, with the technology and the safety measures in place today.
However, there are others who disagree. The environmental group Greenpeace published findings of a field investigation outside the Chernobyl zone. It said food products are still contaminated in the area, and this, they warn, could be the scenario that awaits Japan following the accident at Fukushima nuclear plant. Vladimir Chuprov is the head of the anti-nuclear program at Greenpeace Russia.
The main lessons we should study from Chernobyl disaster, from Fukushima tragedy, is that there is no safe nuclear reactor, like nuclear industry people say. Nobody can guarantee, 100% guarantee, that there will not be a repeat of Fukushima scenario.
The Chernobyl disaster is different from Fukushima's. Open to the air, a graphite fire burned for 10 days, spewing huge amounts of radioactive material. That wasn't the case in Japan. But Chernobyl is still significant, as it serves as a perfect demonstration to what may happen next. Even though the scope of contamination is smaller, Fukushima is likely to demand a commitment of unforeseeable dimensions for decades to come. For World Insight, I'm Anya Ardaeva in Chernobyl.